unemployed husband stole $5,000 intended for our 6-year-old daughter's heart surgery to fund a luxury trip to Las Vegas. You heard that right. While I was working 12-hour shifts as a trauma nurse to keep my child alive, Mark was draining her medical fund to buy a $3,000 suit and impress a room full of strangers. He looked me in the eye, while our daughter was gasping for air in the next room, and told me that I was the selfish one for not supporting his vision. I feel like I am hollowed out from the inside. I am Daisy, a woman who thought she was making sacrifices for her marriage, but I was actually financing my own destruction. He did not just take the money. He forged my signature, sold our home to a loan shark, and tried to blackmail my own cousin, all to feed an ego that was hungrier than his love for his family. How do you sleep at night when the person sleeping next to you is a monster in disguise? How do you forgive yourself for letting a wolf into the nursery? I am standing in the wreckage of my life with nothing but a foreclosure notice and a broken heart. Please tell me, did I do the right thing by sending the father of my child to prison? Or have I just destroyed everything? What would you have done? My name is Daisy Miller. I am 38 years old, and I smell like antiseptic, a stale coffee, and the quiet desperation of the graveyard shift. I work as a trauma nurse at a public hospital just outside of Chicago, stitching up the wounds of strangers for 12 hours a night, so I can come home and bleed out slowly in my own living room. From the outside, my life looks like the standard American dream, specifically the version sold in glossy brochures for Naperville suburbs. We have a 3-bedroom colonial with vinyl siding, a 2-car garage, and a lawn that meets the strict requirements of the Homeowners Association. But if you look closer, past the manicured hedges, you will see the cracks in the foundation. Literally, the drywall in the foyer has a water stain shaped like a lung, expanding with every storm because we cannot afford to fix the roof. It was 6 a.m. when I pulled my 10-year-old Toyota Camry into the driveway. The brake pads screeched, a high-pitched wail that echoed through the silent neighborhood. I winced, checking the rearview mirror to see if the lights in the neighbors' houses flicked on. Mrs. Higgins next door already threatened to report us to the Homeowners Association about the unsightly oil stains my car leaves on the concrete. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were dry, the skin around my cuticles cracked from washing them 100 times a shift. This was my ritual. 5 minutes of silence before I walked into the war zone. Just breathe, Daisy. Just get through the morning routine. Feed Lily. Check her meds. Sleep for 4 hours. Do it again. I stepped out into the biting Illinois wind and unlocked the front door. The house was quiet, but it was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a place where too many things are left unsaid. The kitchen lights were already on. Mark was sitting at the granite island, the one we put on a credit card 5 years ago and are still paying off. My husband, Mark Miller, 40 years old, former real estate agent, currently in between opportunities for the 24th consecutive month. He was not looking for jobs on LinkedIn. He was not researching affordable contractors for the roof. He was holding a piece of heavy, cream-colored cardstock, running his thumb over the embossed lettering with a look of pure, unadulterated longing. "You are late," Mark said without looking up. His voice was smooth, lacking any curiosity about why I was late. He did not ask about the pileup on I-290 or the teenager who died on my table at 3 a.m. "Shift ran over," I said, dropping my heavy bag on the floor. My shoulders screamed in protest. "Is Lily up?" "She is coughing again." I turned up the humidifier. Mark finally looked at me. He was wearing a silk robe he had bought 3 months ago, a purchase he justified as essential for his mental self-image. His hair was perfectly styled, despite having nowhere to go. "We need to talk about this. Daisy." He slid the card across the granite. It spun smoothly and stopped in front of me. It was a wedding invitation, heavy, expensive. The edges were dipped in gold leaf. "Chloe Stevens and Arthur P. Henderson request the honor of your presence. Saoyu Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu." "Chloe," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "My cousin, the one who treated life like an all-you-can-eat buffet where someone else always picked up the tab." "Las Vegas. Of course. It is at the Bellagio." "Daisy," Mark said, his eyes gleaming. "Do you know how hard it is to book the Fountain Terrace? Arthur must be loaded." "This is huge." I walked over to the refrigerator and pulled open the door. The light inside flickered. A half-empty gallon of milk sat next to a container of generic yogurt and a package of deli meat that had expired 2 days ago. There was no juice, no fresh fruit, just condiments and the cold air of poverty. "We can send a gift," I said, closing the fridge. "Maybe a toaster, or a nice card." Mark let out a sharp, derisive laugh. It was a sound I had grown to hate, the sound of him correcting a child. "A toaster? Are you insane?" He stood up, walking around the island to lean against the counter, crossing his arms. "This is a networking goldmine. Daisy, Arthur Henderson is in commercial development. If I can get 5 minutes with him, I could land a consulting gig that pays more in a month than you make in a year. Here we go. The phantom job, the big break that is always just one expensive dinner or one new suit away." "To Mark," I said, keeping my voice low, steady, the nurse voice, the one I used on patients who were hallucinating. "We have $300 in the checking account until next Friday. The mortgage is overdue, and Lily needs that surgery. The copay for the specialist alone is going to be $2,000. Do not start with the math," Mark snapped, his face tightening. "You always do this. You reduce everything to pennies and kill the vibe. This is about vision. Daisy, you have to spend money to make money." He picked up the invitation again, tapping it against his palm. I looked up flights. "If we book now, we can get decent seats, not first class. Obviously, since you are so worried about the budget, but economy plus, and we need a room at the Bellagio. We cannot stay at some dump off the strip and walk in there like peasants." It looks desperate. I stared at him. I looked at the man I had married 10 years ago, the man who used to make me laugh, the man who promised to take care of us. Now, I just saw a stranger in a silk robe who was willing to bleed us dry to keep up appearances. "We are desperate." "Mark," I whispered, "we are broke. Speak for yourself." He sneered. "I have potential. You just refuse to see it because you are too busy playing the martyr." He turned his back on me and walked toward the living room, shouting over his shoulder, "I am going to the club to hit a few balls." Clears my head. "We will discuss the booking details tonight. Figure it out. Daisy, do not embarrass me." I stood alone in the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Figure it out. That was the motto of our marriage. Mark created the mess, and I figured it out. I fixed it. I patched the holes. I walked softly down the hallway to Lily's room. It was dark, smelling of lavender and vapor rub. My 6-year-old daughter lay tangled in her blankets, her chest rising and falling with a shallow, rhythmic wheeze. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light. Her lips had that faint bluish tint that haunted my nightmares, the sign that her heart was not pumping enough oxygen. I knelt beside her bed and brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead. She was the only thing that mattered. The surgery was scheduled for next month. It was the only way to fix the defect, to give her a normal life. I had been saving every scrap of overtime pay, hiding it away in a separate savings account Mark did not check often. The emergency fund, $5,000. It had taken me 2 years of skipped lunches and double shifts to save that $5,000. It was barely enough for the deductible and the post-op care, but it was a start. It was her lifeline. I kissed her forehead and stood up, exhaustion washing over me like a physical weight. I walked back to the kitchen to make a cup of instant coffee. As I reached for a mug, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from the bank. Alert, balance below threshold. My heart skipped a beat. That could not be right. The checking account was low. Yes, but the savings account, Lily's account, should have been stable. I unlocked my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I tapped the banking app. The blue wheel spun for a second, then the numbers flashed on the screen. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The savings account balance was $12.42. The coffee mug slipped from my hand. It hit the floor with a shattering crash, shards of ceramic exploding across the linoleum. But I did not hear it. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, a deafening roar of panic and realization. The transaction history stared back at me, glowing in the morning light. Yesterday, transferred to external account, $5,000, pending transaction, Tom Ford Boutique, Chicago. Pending transaction, Vegas VIP concierge service. The air left the room. I could not breathe. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped. He did not just want to go to Vegas. He had already decided, and he had taken the only thing that mattered. He had taken Lily's heart. The sound of the ceramic mug shattering against the linoleum was loud enough to wake the dead, or at least loud enough to bring Mark back from the hallway. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, his golf bag slung over one shoulder, looking down at the shards of white porcelain scattered around my feet. He did not ask if I was hurt. He did not ask why his wife, who had the steady hands of a trauma nurse, was suddenly dropping things. "You are making a mess, Daisy," he said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of exhaustion he reserved for dealing with me. "Seriously, can you not handle a simple coffee mug? I just cleaned in here yesterday." He had not cleaned. He had moved a pile of mail from the counter to the drawer. But I did not say that. I could not feel my toes. The cold realization from the banking app was spreading up my legs, freezing me in place. I held up my phone. My hand was shaking so badly the screen blurred. "Where is the money, Mark?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, foreign to my own ears. "Where is the $5,000 from the savings account?" Mark Sehild. It was a long, theatrical sigh that involved his whole body slumping, the heavy golf bag clinking against the doorframe. He looked at the ceiling as if asking God for patience. "I told you," he said, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. "We need to invest in our image." I moved some funds around to cover the trip. "It is called liquidity. Daisy, you would understand if you had ever taken a finance class instead of just changing bedpans all day." Moved funds around? I stepped over the broken pottery, ignoring the crunch under my nursing shoes. That was not just funds. Mark, That was Lily's heart money. That was the deductible for the surgery next month. That was the money for her anti-rejection meds. I expected him to flinch. I expected him to look ashamed, to realize he had made a mistake, to apologize. But Mark did not flinch. He hardened, his jaw set, and his eyes narrowed into slits of cold blue ice. "Stop being so dramatic," he snapped. He took a step toward me, and instinctively, I took a step back. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very small. "The surgery is not until the 20th, he continued, his voice rising. "That is weeks away. Do you have zero faith in me? Do you think I am going to go to Vegas, meet Arthur Henderson, and come back empty-handed? I am going to close a deal there. Daisy, I will bring back 10 times that amount. I am doing this for us. For Lily? For Lily?" I choked out the words. "You bought a suit." "Mark, I saw the charge, $3,000 at Tom Ford. You bought a suit while your daughter is sleeping in the next room with half a working heart." Mark slammed his hand down on the granite counter. The noise echoed through the house, silencing the hum of the refrigerator. "Because I have to look the part," he shouted. "God, you are so short-sighted. This is why we are stuck in this rut. Daisy, because you have a poverty mindset, you cling to every penny like it is life or death, and it suffocates me. You make me feel small. You make me feel like a failure in my own home." He was doing it again. The twist, the pivot. Suddenly, the conversation was not about him stealing our daughter's medical fund. It was about me. It was about how I was not supportive enough, how I was dragging him down, how my anxiety was the real villain in our marriage. I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The gaslighting was so practiced, so seamless. It was like watching a magician perform a trick I had seen 100 times but still could not figure out. "I need some air," Mark said, adjusting his collar with an indignant huff. "I cannot deal with this negativity right now. I need to get my head in the game before the trip. I am going to the range." He turned and walked out the back door. The screen door slammed shut, followed by the heavy thud of the solid wood door. I was alone again. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence settle back over the house. Outside, an engine revved. Mark's leased BMW, another financial noose around our necks, and then faded down the street. Inner monologue. He is right. Maybe he is right. Maybe I am too anxious. Maybe I am the reason he has not found a job in 2 years. If I was more supportive, if I did not nag him about bills, maybe he would have the confidence to land a big contract. $3,000 for a suit is an investment, right? You have to dress for the job you want. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am just tired. I sank down to the floor and began to pick up the pieces of the mug with my bare hands. A sharp edge sliced into my thumb. I watched the bead of bright red blood well up, a stark contrast against the white ceramic. The pain was sharp, grounding, saluting howling. "Due cancelletto è maggiore di no." I wrapped a paper towel around my thumb and squeezed. The pain cleared the fog in my brain for a second. This was not an investment. This was theft. I pulled my phone out again and sat on the cold floor, scrolling through the transaction history. I needed to see it. I needed to hurt myself with the truth so I would not fall back into the lie that everything was okay. There it was. Tom Ford, $3,200. Vegas VIP services, $1,500. Liquor barn, $300. I tapped on the Vegas transaction details. It was listed as a deposit for a bachelor package at a club called the Sapphire Gentleman. He had not just booked a flight and a room. He had booked a party. He was taking my cousin's fiancé out for a night of debauchery, using the money meant to fix the hole in my daughter's chest. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I rushed to the sink and dry heaved, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. The house felt like it was closing in on me. The water stain in the foyer looked less like a lung now and more like a rot, spreading, consuming everything. I looked down the hallway toward Lily's room. I could hear her coughing again, a wet, rattling sound that tore through my chest. I had to fix this. I always fix this. But the checking account was empty. The credit cards were maxed out from the time Mark tried to day trade cryptocurrency last year. I had no resources left. My eyes drifted to the small jewelry box sitting on the dresser in the hallway. Inside was my grandmother's pearl necklace and my own wedding band, the one I had stopped wearing to work because I was afraid of losing it in a glove, but mostly because it felt like a lie to wear it. I walked over to the box and opened it. The gold band glinted in the dim light. It was 18-karat gold, heavy, inscribed with the date of our wedding and the word forever. Mark was at the golf course, likely drinking a $12 beer and telling his buddies about the big deal he was about to close. He was not worrying about how we would buy groceries this week or how we would pay for the pre-op blood work on Monday. I closed the box and shoved it into my pocket. I grabbed my coat. I needed to go to the grocery store. I needed to go to the pharmacy. And before that, I needed to make a stop at the pawn shop on 4th Street. As I walked out the door, I looked at the spot where Mark's car usually sat. The oil stain was fresh, dark, and slick. "You think I am the problem, Mark?" I whispered to the empty driveway. "You think I am the one with the poverty mindset?" I got into my rusted Toyota and turned the key. The engine sputtered, struggled, and then roared to life. I backed out of the driveway, leaving my own house like a thief in the night, while the man who stole our future was out practicing his swing. The kitchen was dark when Mark finally came home. I had not turned on the overhead lights. I was sitting at the kitchen island, the cold granite seeping through the sleeves of my scrubs. My hands were folded on top of the table, clasping the crumpled receipt from the pawn shop on 4th Street. $350. That was what my wedding ring, and the promise of for better or for worse, was worth in the current market economy. It was 8 o'clock at night. Outside, the wind was howling, rattling the loose pane in the living room window, a sound that usually set my teeth on edge. But tonight, I was numb. The front door opened. The heavy footsteps were different tonight. They were not the shuffling, defeated steps of a man who had spent the day hitting golf balls while his family starved. They were confident, rhythmic. The click of hard leather soles on the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown. "Daisy, why are you sitting in the dark?" Mark flipped the switch. The sudden flood of artificial light stung my eyes, but I did not blink. I looked up, and for a moment, I did not recognize the man standing in my entryway. Mark was not wearing his stained sweatpants or the golf polo that was tight around the midsection. He was wearing the suit. It was a charcoal gray masterpiece, tailored to perfection. The fabric shimmered slightly under the kitchen lights, a blend of wool and silk that screamed luxury. The lapels were sharp, cutting a V shape down to a single button that held the jacket closed over a crisp, white dress shirt. He had even polished his shoes. He looked like a chief executive officer. He looked like a man who owned the world. He looked like he was wearing my daughter's heart surgery. "You bought it," I said. My voice was flat. "You actually bought it?" Mark smoothed the front of the jacket, with a preening, self-satisfied grin. He walked toward me, turning slightly to the left and then to the right, modeling the garment like he was on a runway in Milan and not in a kitchen that smelled of mildew and old garbage. "It is magnificent, is it not?" Mark said. "The tailor at Tom Ford is a genius. He said I have the shoulders of a linebacker. He had to let it out a bit in the chest. But the drape is perfect. This, Daisy, is what success looks like. That is what theft looks like." I whispered. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. "That suit cost $3,200. Mark, I saw the receipt. I saw the bank transfer." Mark stopped admiring himself in the reflection of the microwave and turned to look at me. His smile did not disappear, but it changed. It became tight, patronizing. "We went over this," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "It is an investment. Arthur Henderson is not going to give the time of day to a guy wearing something from a department store rack. This suit commands respect." Respect? I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. A hysterical, jagged thing. "You stole money from your sick child to impress a man you have never met. How is that respectable? Lily needs that money." "Mark, the hospital called today. They want to confirm the down payment for the procedure by Friday. They can wait." Mark snapped. "Medical billing is a racket anyway. You know that better than anyone. Just tell them there's a delay with the insurance. Lie to them." "Daisy, you are good at lying." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked. "I have never lied to you." Mark took a step closer. The smell of expensive leather and new fabric wafted off him, masking the scent of the bourbon I knew he had been drinking. He loomed over me, using his height to intimidate, his blue eyes boring into mine. "Oh, really?" Mark lowered his voice to a dangerous, silky whisper. "Are we going to pretend that 2 years ago never happened? Are we going to pretend that you did not shatter my trust? That you did not break this family first?" My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. It was the weapon he kept in his back pocket, the nuclear option he detonated every time I tried to hold him accountable for anything. "Mark, that was 2 years ago," I pleaded, my voice trembling, "and nothing happened. I told you, I was depressed. I was working 80 hours a week. I just talked to him. Dr. Evans." Mark spat the name like it was a curse word. "The handsome cardiologist. The man you texted at 2 in the morning. The man you told about how lonely you were. Do you know what that does to a man? Daisy, do you know what it feels like to know your wife is emotionally undressing herself for another man while you are sleeping in the same bed?" Inner monologue. It was not like that. I want to scream. It was not like that. I was drowning. Lily had just been diagnosed. Mark was ignoring me, spending all his time playing video games. Evans was just kind. He listened. We texted about patience. We texted about how hard the night shift was. Yes, I told him I was lonely because I was married to a ghost, but I never touched him. I never crossed the line. I cut it off the moment I realized I was relying on him too much. "But Mark, Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than Mark, makes it sound like a sordid motel affair." I apologized. I said, tears stinging my eyes. I apologized 1,000 times. I went to therapy. I gave you all my passwords. I have done everything to make it up to you. And it is not enough. Mark roared. The sudden volume made me jump. He paced the small kitchen, the expensive shoes clicking aggressively. He threw his hands up. the Tom Ford jacket straining slightly at the shoulders. You think an apology fixes the damage you did to my psyche? To my confidence? He pointed a finger at his own chest. Why do you think I cannot hold down a job, Daisy? Why do you think I struggle to get out of bed? Because I feel emasculated. Every time I look at you, I see a woman who did not think I was enough. You castrated me emotionally. He stopped pacing and leaned in close to my face. I could smell the mint he had chewed to cover the alcohol. This trip to Vegas? This suit? This is not just a party. He hissed. This is rehabilitation. I need to feel like a man again. I need to walk into a room and feel powerful. I need to be admired. And since my wife is incapable of admiring me, I have to go find that validation somewhere else. I have to buy it. I stared at him, my mouth agape. The logic was so twisted, so labyrinthine, that I could not find the exit. He was claiming that stealing our daughter's surgery money was actually my fault, that I had forced him to do this because I had texted a coworker 2 years ago. So, 2, I stammered, trying to process the insanity of it. So the $5,000, 2 hash is greater than that is what? Therapy fees? Call it reparations, Mark said coldly. He straightened his tie. You owe me this. Daisy, you owe me my dignity back. If I land a deal with Henderson, I will be the one bringing home the bacon. I will be the hero. And maybe then, I can forgive you. But Lily, 2 hash is greater than I tried one last time. My voice barely a whisper. What if she gets sick while you are gone? What if the hospital cancels the surgery? Mark laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Lily will be fine. She is a tough kid. Stop using her as a shield to hide your own guilt. It is pathetic. He turned and walked toward the refrigerator, opening it to grab a bottle of water. He took a sip, then looked back at me with a casual, terrifying indifference. By the way, he said, I know you were thinking about calling your mother to beg for money again. Do not. I froze it. I had indeed thought about it. My parents were retired, living on a fixed pension in Florida, but they were my only safety net. If you tell your parents about the money, Mark said, screwing the cap back onto the water bottle, I will tell them the truth about Dr. Evans. I will tell them everything. I will show them the screenshots I saved. I will tell your father that his perfect little daughter is an adulterer who drove her husband to depression. My blood ran cold. My father was a deacon in the church. He was a man of black and white morality. If he believed Mark, and Mark was so charming, so convincing, it would break his heart. It would destroy my relationship with them. You would not, I whispered. Try me, Mark said. He checked his reflection in the microwave again, adjusting a stray hair. I am leaving tomorrow morning. My flight is at 10. Make sure my shirts are ironed and packed. And Daisy? He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with contempt. Try to look a little less miserable when I leave. It is a buzzkill. He walked out of the kitchen, whistling a tune I did not recognize. I stood there in the silence, the receipt for my wedding ring burning a hole in my pocket. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. He had won. He always won. He had taken the money. He had taken the high ground. And now he had taken my voice. Inner monologue. I am a coward. A weak, pathetic coward. He is stealing Lily's life. And I am standing here worrying about what my father will think of me. But I cannot fight him. He is too fast, too cruel. If I push him, he burns the house down. So I have to let him go. I have to let him take the money and the suit and the dignity. I have to find another way to save Lily, even if I have to sell my soul to do it. I walked over to the trash can and pulled out the foot pedal. The lid opened with a clang. I looked at the pawn shop receipt one last time, then crumpled it into a tight ball and dropped it into the garbage, burying it under the coffee grounds and eggshells. Mark was going to Vegas, and I was going into hell. The silence that filled the house after Mark left was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had not yet detonated. I watched from the living room window as the Uber Black driver loaded Mark's luggage into the trunk. Mark stood on the curb in his $3,000 suit, checking his watch, looking for all the world like a captain of industry heading off to conquer a merger. He did not look back at the house. He did not wave to me or to Lily, who was watching cartoons in the den, oblivious to the fact that her father was flying to Las Vegas on the money meant to save her life. I let the curtain fall back into place. My hands were trembling, but not from cold. I was vibrating with a mixture of rage and terror that made it hard to breathe. Inner monologue. I should have tackled him. I should have run out there and screamed to the neighbors that he is a thief. I should have called the police, but I did nothing. I ironed his shirts. I packed his toiletries. I let him walk away because I am terrified of the skeletons he keeps in his closet, the ones he threatens to drag out every time I show a spine. I am an accomplice to my own destruction. I turned away from the window. The house was cold. The thermostat was set to 62 degrees to save money, but the chill felt like it was coming from inside the walls. I had $20 in my wallet. The refrigerator was still empty. Lily needed her beta blockers refilled by tomorrow afternoon, and the pharmacy copay was $45. I had no choice. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a plastic chair in a strip mall on the bad side of town. The sign outside blinked in neon pink and green. Fast cash. No credit check. Title loans. The air inside smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. I was wearing my nursing scrubs, hoping they would make me look responsible, gainfully employed. Someone who just had a temporary cash flow problem. The woman behind the bulletproof glass did not care. She chewed gum loudly, her long acrylic nails clicking against the keyboard like hail on a tin roof. "Sign here," she said, sliding a clipboard under the slot. "And here, an initial at the bottom." I stared at the paper. The annual percentage rate was 400%. If I borrowed $500 today, I would owe nearly $600 in 2 weeks. It was usury. It was a trap designed to keep people like me drowning forever. Inner monologue. This is how it happens. This is how you lose everything. You dig one hole to fill another. But what else can I do? Lily has to eat. Lily has to have her medicine. Mark took everything. I am signing my life away for groceries. I signed my name, Daisy Miller. The ink was barely dry when the woman counted out $500 in $20 bills and slid them under the glass. I took the money. It felt dirty in my hands. I drove straight to the pharmacy, then the grocery store. I bought generic cereal, milk, eggs, and the medication. By the time I got home, the sky was turning a bruised purple, the sun setting on the worst day of my life. I fed Lily dinner. She was quiet, sensing my stress the way animals sense a coming storm. "Daddy went to work?" she asked, pushing a spoon around her bowl of oatmeal. "Yes, baby," I lied. My voice was steady, practiced. "Daddy went to a big meeting. He's going to make everything better." I put her to bed early. I needed to be alone. I needed to figure out how I was going to pay back the loan shark in 2 weeks without Mark finding out. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank television screen. When the knock came, it was not a friendly knock. It was not the rhythmic tap of a neighbor or the delivery driver. It was 3 hard, heavy pounds that shook the front door in its frame. Thud, thud, thud. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was 9 o'clock at night. I walked to the door, my socks sliding on the hardwood. I peered through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a man I had never seen before. He was short but broad, wearing a leather jacket that was too tight across his shoulders. He had a shaved head and a tattoo of a spider web creeping up the side of his neck. He was not a neighbor. He was not from the homeowners association. I should not have opened the door. Every instinct screamed at me to lock the deadbolt and call the police. But fear makes you do stupid things. I cracked the door 2 inches, leaving the security chain latched. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man looked at me through the crack. His eyes were dark, flat, devoid of any warmth. He did not smile. "Mark Miller," he said. It was not a question. "He is not home," I said, tightening my grip on the door. "Who are you?" "He is not home?" The man let out a short, dry chuckle. "Let me guess. Vegas?" The blood drained from my face. How did this stranger know where my husband was? "Who are you?" I repeated, my voice rising in panic. The man leaned in closer. I could smell stale tobacco and cheap cologne. "Name it is Vinny. I work for Mr. Russo. Your husband knows him. Mark borrowed some capital from us about 3 months ago. Said he had a hot tip on a real estate flip." I frowned. Real estate flip? Mark had not worked in real estate in 2 years. "I do not know what you are talking about," I said. "Mark does not do flips anymore." Vinny laughed again, a sound like gravel crunching under tires. "Yeah, lady, we figured that out. Because he did not buy a house. He bought a lot of chips at the Riverboat Casino, and he lost them. All of them." The world tilted on its axis. Casino, Riverboat. Mark told me he was investing in his business. He told me the money disappeared because the market was volatile. He owes Mr. Russo $20,000. Vinny said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "The interest is compounding daily. And since Mark is not answering his phone, I thought I would come by and leave a message with the little woman. $20,000. The number echoed in my head. It was impossible. It was more money than I made in 6 months. "You are mistaken," I whispered. "Mark does not gamble. He is just Saoyudzing Haolin. 2 is greater than unlucky with jobs." Vinny reached into his jacket pocket. I flinched, terrifying images flashing through my mind. But he only pulled out a piece of paper. He folded it and shoved it through the crack in the door. It was a photocopy of a promissory note. It had Mark's signature, and below it, listed as collateral, was the vehicle identification number of my Toyota Camry and the address of this house. "Tell him the clock is ticking," Vinny said. "He has got until he gets back from Vegas to come up with at least $5,000. Or we stop being polite. And lady," he looked past me, into the dark hallway where Lily's room was. "Nice kid you got. Would be a shame if she grew up without a roof over her head." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the suburban night. I slammed the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I backed away, my legs giving out until I hit the wall and slid down to the floor. I looked at the paper in my hand. My husband was not just a narcissist. He was not just a thief. He was an addict. He had borrowed money from loan sharks, gambling away our future, and he had used our home, our only shelter, as collateral. I pulled out my phone. I opened the tracking app I had installed on Mark's phone months ago, telling myself it was for safety in case he had car trouble. I had never checked it, guilt always stopping me, but the guilt was gone now. Fear had burned it away. The blue dot on the screen blinked. He was in Las Vegas, but he was not at the Bellagio. The dot was hovering over a residential complex on the outskirts of the Strip. The Palms Place penthouse suites. I stared at the dot. Why was he at a private residence? Then I remembered the wedding invitation. Chloe, my cousin. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Daisy? Her voice was breathless, giggly. What is up? I am kind of busy. I gripped the phone. Hey, Chloe, I said, forcing a cheerful tone that tasted like bile. Just wanted to wish you luck. Is Mark there yet? He said he was meeting up with Arthur. There was a pause, a hesitation. Oh, Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than, yeah. Mark is here, Chloe said. Her voice changed. It became lower, husky. But he is not with Arthur. Arthur is at his bachelor dinner. Mark is actually Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than helping me with something at my suite. He is so sweet. Daisy. He really knows how to work out the knots in my shoulders. The line went dead. I sat on the floor in the dark hallway. The paper from Vinny was crumpled in my left hand. The phone was in my right. My husband was a gambler. My husband was a liar. And now, I was almost certain. My husband was sleeping with my cousin. I looked down the hall at Lily's door. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. I was done crying. I was done being the victim. I walked into the kitchen and opened my laptop. I searched for flights to Las Vegas. One way, Spirit Airlines. Departing in 4 hours. I was not going to wait for him to come home. I was going to bring the war to him. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a monotonous drone that matched the emptiness expanding inside my chest, working out the knots. The phrase replayed in my mind, looping over and over like a broken record. My cousin Chloe, the bride-to-be, the woman who was about to marry a multimillionaire, was in a hotel room with my husband, and she was not talking about business. I lowered the phone slowly. My hand was no longer shaking. A strange, cold calm had settled over me, freezing the tears before they could form. It was the same calm I felt in the trauma room when a patient flatlined. Panic was a luxury I could no longer afford. Panic was for people who had something left to lose. I had nothing. I walked into the small, cluttered guest room Mark called his office. It was a shrine to his unfinished ambitions. Stacks of self-help books he had never read lined the shelves. A half-assembled ergonomic chair sat in the corner. His MacBook Pro, another purchase we could not afford, sat on the desk, the little white light on the charging cable glowing in the dark. I sat down in his chair. It creaked under my weight. I opened the lid. The screen flared to life. He had not shut it down, just put it to sleep. The password prompt appeared. Mark was not a complex man. He was a narcissist. I typed in the word legacy, followed by his birth year. Access granted. The desktop was a mess of files, but my eyes went straight to the Photos application running in the background. He must have been looking at old pictures before he left, fueling his nostalgia, or perhaps his resentment. I clicked on the library. Thousands of images scrolled by. Mark at the golf course. Mark in his new suit. Mark taking selfies in the mirror while I was at work. I scrolled back, further back, past our wedding photos, which he rarely looked at, past the photos of Lily as a baby, which were few and far between. I stopped at a folder labeled College Days, Unfiltered. I double-clicked it, the screen filled with the faces of young, intoxicated students, red cups, dorm rooms, and there, in photo after photo, was Mark, younger, thinner, with that same arrogant smile, and draped over him, in almost every shot, was Chloe. They were not just friends. In one photo, they were kissing, her legs wrapped around his waist. In another, they were asleep on a futon, tangled together. The date stamp on the metadata read 15 years ago. I stared at the screen. Mark had never mentioned knowing Chloe in college. When we received the invitation, he acted as if she was just my distant cousin, a connection he was happy to exploit. But they had a history he had deliberately erased from his narrative. Why hide it, unless the history was the leverage? I minimized the photos and opened his email. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I searched for Chloe. One email thread appeared. It was dated 2 weeks ago. Subject: the wedding gift. I opened it. From Mark to Chloe. I am coming to the wedding, Chloe, and I expect we can come to an arrangement regarding the old tapes. Arthur does not need to know about the spring break of 2008. I need $5,000 for the buy-in. Consider it a consulting fee for my silence. Reply from Chloe: fine, just come alone and bring the drive. If you ruin this for me, Mark, I swear to God. Sao yu jing hao ling, art jing hao dayu. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. It was not a networking trip. It was a blackmail scheme. Mark had stolen Lily's surgery money to fly to Vegas to extort my cousin, using a sex tape or some other filth from their past to fund his gambling addiction. He was not looking for a job. He was looking for a payout. And the worst part, he had used me. He had used my family connection to get the invitation. He had gaslighted me about my emotional affair to justify his trip, all while planning to destroy another marriage for profit. I looked at the time on the corner of the screen. 11 o'clock. I closed the laptop. I did not turn it off. I wanted everything exactly as it was. I stood up and walked out of the office. The hallway was dark, but I did not need light. I knew this house. I knew every creak of the floorboards, every drafty corner. I walked into Lily's room. She was sleeping soundly, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her breathing was still raspy, a constant reminder of the ticking clock in her chest. I placed my hand on the door frame. I looked at her, really looked at her. For 6 years, I had been the peacekeeper. I had swallowed my pride, hidden the bills, and apologized for things I did not do, all to keep this family together for her. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her father in the picture. I was wrong. I was not protecting her. I was feeding her to a wolf. If I stayed here, if I waited for Mark to come back, we would lose the house. The loan shark, Vinny, would come back. Lily would end up on the street. Mark would gamble away the blackmail money, just like he gambled away the surgery fund. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud break. It was quiet, like a dead branch falling in the snow. The Daisy Miller who begged for forgiveness was dead. The Daisy Miller who was afraid of her own shadow was gone. I turned around and walked to my bedroom. I pulled a duffel bag from the top shelf of the closet. I did not pack clothes for a vacation. I packed for a mission. Black jeans, a heavy hoodie, my comfortable nursing sneakers. I grabbed the envelope of cash from the title loan. The $500 that was supposed to buy groceries for 2 weeks. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were rimmed with red, and my skin was pale, but my jaw was set. I looked like a stranger. I looked like someone dangerous. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. "Mom, I am sorry to wake you," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. I just got called in for an emergency crisis shift at the hospital, a mass casualty event. I need to drop Lily off. Yes, right now. It might be for a few days. I listened to her worried voice on the other end, assuring me it was fine. I did not feel guilty for lying. The truth was too heavy to share right now. "Thank you, Mom. I am on my way." I hung up. I went into Lily's room and gently shook her awake. "Baby," I whispered, "we are going to Grandma's house for a sleepover." "Now?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Is Daddy home?" "No," I said, lifting her into my arms. She felt lighter than she should be. "Daddy is not home, and he is never going to hurt us again." 30 minutes later, I was alone in my car, driving toward O'Hare International Airport. The highway was empty, a ribbon of concrete stretching out into the darkness. I pulled up the Spirit Airlines app on my phone at a red light. I booked the next flight to Las Vegas. It left at 2 in the morning. It cost $380, most of the grocery money. I did not care. I did not care about the debt. I did not care about the job I was abandoning without notice. Mark thought he was the main character of this story. He thought he could steal, lie, and cheat without consequence because I was just the supporting actress, the doormat who kept the lights on. He was wrong. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The old Toyota groaned. Pushing past the speed limit, I was coming for him, and I was going to burn his entire world to the ground. Las Vegas was a sensory assault, even at 4 in the morning. The city pulsed with a frantic, artificial energy that made my skin crawl. The air in the terminal smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and despair. Slot machines chimed incessantly near the baggage claim, a cheerful soundtrack to the sound of people losing their rent money. I did not have luggage to claim. I walked straight out into the desert heat, which lingered even in the pre-dawn darkness. I caught a shuttle bus to the Strip, ignoring the chatter of drunk tourists who were just finishing their night while mine was beginning. I got off near the Bellagio. The fountains were silent. The great artificial lake, dark and still like a mirror reflecting the neon monstrosities around it. I pulled my hood up and put on a pair of oversized sunglasses I had bought at a gas station. I felt ridiculous, like a low-budget spy. But anonymity was my only armor. I checked the tracking app, the blue dot. Mark was moving. He had left the residential complex and was now inside the Bellagio. I walked into the casino. The transition from the humid outside air to the frigid, oxygen-pumped climate of the gaming floor was jarring. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of bells, electronic whistles, and the low roar of hundreds of conversations. I moved through the crowd, keeping my head down. I was looking for a charcoal gray Tom Ford suit. It did not take long. He was at a roulette table near the high-limit area. Even from 50 feet away, he was unmistakable. He stood taller than the men around him, his posture rigid with adrenaline. Chloe was beside him. She was wearing a shimmering silver dress that looked like it cost more than my car. She was laughing, her hand resting possessively on his arm, whispering something into his ear. They looked like a power couple. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. I moved closer, slipping behind a row of slot machines that faced the roulette pit. I was close enough to see the sweat glistening on Mark's forehead. He was not smiling. His eyes were darting frantically between the wheel and the stack of chips in front of him. Red. I heard him say, his voice was hoarse. Put it all on red. Mark, are you sure? Chloe asked, her voice carrying a note of nervous excitement. That is the last of it. Shut up, Chloe, Mark snapped. He pushed a stack of black chips onto the table. I can feel it. The streak is turning. My stomach twisted. Those black chips. Each one was $100. There were at least 20 of them in that stack. That was $2,000. That was Lily's medication for a year. That was the roof over our heads. The croupier spun the wheel. The little white ball rattled around the track. A blur of motion that held my entire life in its orbit. Click, click, click. The ball slowed down. It bounced. It teetered. It landed in a black slot. Number 28. Black 28. The croupier announced. His voice devoid of emotion. He reached out with his rake and swept the chips away. Mark slammed his fist onto the green felt. Rigged, he shouted, his face turning a mottled red. This table is rigged. Sir, please lower your voice, the pit boss said, stepping out from the shadows. Chloe pulled at Mark's arm. Mark, stop. People are looking. Let us go. I am not going anywhere until I get my money back. Mark shook her off roughly. He turned to her, his eyes wild. Give me more. I need another buy-in. I gave you $5,000 an hour ago, Chloe hissed, looking around fearfully. That is it. Mark, Arthur will notice if I withdraw any more. I do not care about Arthur. Mark grabbed her wrist. I saw her flinch. You owe me. Chloe, remember the drive? Remember the video? Do you want Arthur to see what his blushing bride looked like on spring break? Give me the money. I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a gasp. He was doing it right there. In the middle of the casino floor, he was extorting her in public, too desperate and too addicted to care about discretion. Saoyi Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I cannot, Chloe stammered, tears welling in her eyes. I do not have cash. I have chips. Give me the chips then. Mark snatched a handful of chips from her clutch. That was for the surgery. Mark, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. You said if I gave you the first $5,000, you would use it for your daughter. You said she was dying. I froze. The world narrowed down to that single sentence. Mark laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound that cut through the casino noise. Daisy is always exaggerating. He sneered, stacking Chloe's chips. The kid is fine. She has a little murmur. Daisy just wants the surgery so she can play the victim card and get sympathy from her family. Lily is not going to die, but I am going to die of boredom if I do not win this hand. The air left my lungs. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the side of the slot machine to keep from falling. He knew how sick she was. He had sat in the cardiologist's office with me. He had seen the echocardiogram. He had seen the hole in her heart, and he was lying. He was lying to his mistress, lying to himself, rewriting reality to justify his greed. He was not just stealing money. He was stealing the truth of my daughter's suffering. He was minimizing her pain to fuel his addiction. I watched him turn back to the table, his face lit by the manic glow of a man chasing a loss he could never recover. He placed the stolen chips on the table. I did not wait to see the ball spin. I turned and ran. I pushed through the crowd, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face beneath the sunglasses. I ran until I found a bathroom near the lobby. I locked myself in a stall and sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I retched, but nothing came out. I was empty. Inner monologue He does not love her. He does not love me. We are just props in his movie. He would let Lily die to win a hand of roulette. He is a monster, and I married him. I let him into our lives. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my vision blurry. It was Mark. I stared at the screen. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated evil of it. I swiped answer. I did not speak. I just listened. Daisy? His voice was panicked, breathless. Daisy. Pick up. Oh God. Something terrible happened. I held the phone tight, my knuckles white. Daisy, are you there? He cried. I was mugged. I just got to the hotel, and 3 guys jumped me in the parking garage. They took everything, my wallet, my phone. Sao Yu Ting Ha Ling. 2 hashes greater than I am calling from the hotel lobby phone. They took the surgery money. Daisy, they put a knife to my throat. The lie was so smooth, so detailed. He was sobbing now. Fake, theatrical sobs. I am so sorry. Baby, I tried to fight them. I tried to save it for Lily, but they were too strong. I need you to wire me money. Just a few thousand to get home and file a police report. Daisy, please. I am bleeding. I am scared. I closed my eyes. I could hear the casino bells in the background of his call. He was not in the lobby. He was still on the floor. He was calling me from the scene of his crime, using my love for our daughter as a weapon to extract the last drops of blood from my veins. Sao Yu Ting Ha Ling. 2. Daisy? I took a deep breath. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. The nurse was back. The mother was back. But the wife? The wife died in that bathroom stall. I will handle it. Mark, I said. My voice was ice. I will take care of everything. Thank you. Baby. He wept. You are an angel. Hurry, please. Sao Yu Ting Ha Ling. 2. I hung up. I stood up and flushed the toilet. I adjusted my hoodie. I looked in the mirror. I was not going to wire him money. I was going to wire him a death sentence. I walked out of the bathroom. I was not leaving the hotel. I was heading to the business center. I had work to do. The lobby of the Bellagio was a world away from the chaotic din of the casino floor. Here, the air smelled of fresh lilies and old money. The marble floors reflected the elaborate glass sculpture on the ceiling, a canopy of colorful, hand-blown flowers that mocked the gray desolation inside me. I pulled my hoodie tighter, feeling painfully out of place among the tourists in linen suits and evening gowns. I was not looking for Mark anymore. I was looking for a ghost from my past, a man I hoped was still staying here. I remembered him mentioning the Bellagio specifically during his recovery. I go there every year for the poker tournament. Daisy, it is my sanctuary. Mr. Thompson, Arthur Thompson, he had been a patient in the intensive care unit 6 months ago. A massive myocardial infarction. I had sat with him for 3 nights while his family was stuck in a snowstorm in Denver. I had held his hand when the fear of dying made him shake. I had cleaned him up when he was too weak to move. He was a high-powered defense attorney in Chicago, a man who charged $1,000 an hour. But in that hospital bed, he was just a scared old man, grateful for a warm blanket. I walked toward the concierge desk, but then I saw him. He was sitting in the high-backed velvet chair near the piano bar, reading a Wall Street journal. He looked healthier now, the color back in his cheeks, dressed in a navy blazer that cost more than my annual salary. I approached him slowly. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the audacity of what I was about to ask. Mr. Thompson? I whispered. He lowered the paper. His sharp gray eyes narrowed for a second, scanning my disheveled appearance, the cheap sunglasses, the hoodie. Then recognition dawned. Nurse Miller? He folded the paper and stood up immediately, ignoring the cane leaning against his chair. Daisy? My God, what are you doing here? You look... Xiao Jing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than are you in trouble? I am, I said, my voice cracking. I am in terrible trouble, Mr. Thompson, and I have no money to pay you, but I need a lawyer. Right now. He did not ask questions. He did not look at his watch. He pointed to the empty chair across from him. Sit down, Daisy, he said softly. You saved my life. Consider me on retainer. 10 minutes later, we were in the hotel's business center. Mr. Thompson had used his platinum status to secure a private conference room. He sat at the mahogany table, his fingers flying across the keyboard of his laptop. I had told him everything. The surgery money, the gambling, the blackmail, the loan shark, but I needed to know the extent of the damage. I need you to check the deed to my house, I said, my hands clasping a cup of water he had brought me. Finny, the loan shark, Xiao Jing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than he had a paper. He said the house was collateral, but my name is on the title. Mark could not have signed it over without me. Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses. He logged into the Cook County Recorder of Deeds database. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the mouse. His face fell. The professional mask of the attorney slipped, revealing genuine pity. Daisy, he said quietly, look at this. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a digital copy of a document. Home equity line of credit, secured by real property. It was dated 3 days ago. The amount was $100,000. And at the bottom, in black ink, were 2 signatures, Mark Miller and Daisy Miller. I touched the screen. The signature looked like mine. The loops on the D, the slant of the... It was a perfect forgery. He practiced. I whispered. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I saw him tracing things at the kitchen table last week. I thought he was doodling. He was practicing my signature to sell our home. Who notarized this? Mr. Thompson asked, pointing to the stamp next to the signatures. Barry G. Lewis Barry, I said, staring at the name. Barry is Mark's old fraternity brother, the one who got disbarred for fraud 5 years ago. So, Mr. Thompson sat back, exhaling a long breath. Your husband forged your signature, used a compromised notary, and stripped the equity from your home. He wired the money to an offshore account, likely a gaming shell company, and then withdrew it here in chips. It is gone, isn't it? I asked. The house, it is gone. Mr. Thompson looked at me with sad eyes. Technically, we can fight this. We can prove fraud. We can sue the bank, but that takes years, Daisy. And in the meantime, the loan is in default. The bank will foreclose. The loan sharks, Xiao Jing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than they do not care about the law. If Mark pledged the house to them as a secondary lien, they will come for it. I closed my eyes. I saw Lily's room. I saw the height chart pencil marked on the doorframe. I saw the garden I had planted in the backyard. It was all ash. Mark had burned it all down for a seat at a roulette table. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Mark again. Text message. Daisy, please tell me you wired the money. The police are asking questions. I need to leave town. I am scared. I stared at the message. The police were not asking questions. He was lying. He was probably sitting at a slot machine right now, down to his last chip, desperate for one more hit. I looked up at Mr. Thompson. The tears were gone. The fear was gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. It was the feeling of a surgeon picking up a scalpel to cut out a tumor. I am not going to save the house, I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. It is already dead. I need to save myself, and I need to bury him. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. What do you want to do? I want a divorce, I said. I want an emergency restraining order, and I want full custody of Lily. Can you draft the papers now? I can, Mr. Thompson said. I can file an emergency petition electronically in Illinois right now. We can allege dissipation of marital assets and domestic fraud. By the time the sun comes up, he will be locked out of everything. Do it, I said. And one more thing, I added, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the flash drive I had taken from Mark's laptop bag before I left the house. The backup of his blackmail material. I had almost forgotten I had it. I want to destroy his leverage. Mr. Thompson looked at the drive, then back at me. Daisy, be careful. If you use that, you are entering a war zone. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the strip. The neon lights were beginning to fade as the desert sun crept over the horizon. I am already in a war zone. Mr. Thompson, I have just been the only one not shooting back. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Mark. Text message. I am handling it. I transferred the funds to your account. It might take an hour to clear. Meet me at the wedding reception. I want to be there to support you when you talk to Arthur. It was the perfect bait. His narcissism would not let him question it. He would think I was still the dutiful, stupid wife coming to rescue him. He would think he had won. Mr. Thompson began to type, the sound of the keys like gunfire in the quiet room. I sat down and watched him work. I was not just a nurse anymore. I was the executioner. And the wedding reception was going to be the gallows. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of the Bellagio. It was an obscenely lavish affair. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over the hundreds of guests. The air smelled of roasted duck, expensive perfume, and the kind of floral arrangements that cost more than a kidney transplant. I stood at the entrance, holding a glass of champagne I did not intend to drink. I had shed the hoodie and jeans in the business center restroom. In their place, I wore a black cocktail dress I had bought at the hotel boutique, using the emergency credit card Mr. Thompson had insisted I use. Consider it a litigation expense, he had said. I looked expensive. I looked dangerous. I looked like a widow in mourning, which, in a way, I was. I was mourning the death of the life I thought I had. I scanned the room. The band was playing a smooth jazz cover of a pop song. Waiters in white gloves glided through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and there he was. Mark was standing near the head table, holding court. He was back in his element, or at least, the element he pretended was his. He was laughing loudly, one hand in the pocket of his Tom Ford trousers, the other gesturing expansively as he spoke to a group of men in suits. One of them was Arthur Henderson, the groom. Mark looked relieved. He must have checked his bank account and seen the pending transfer notification I had faked using a screenshot generator. He thought the cavalry had arrived. He thought he was safe. I walked into the room. The click of my heels on the marble floor was lost in the chatter, but my presence was not. Heads turned. I was not on the guest list, but I walked with the confidence of someone who owned the building. I saw Chloe first. She was sitting at the bride's table, looking pale and jittery. She spotted me, and her eyes went wide. She started to stand up, knocking over her water glass. "Daisy?" she mouthed. I ignored her. I walked straight toward the small stage where the band was setting up for the next set. Mark saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then widened into a grin that did not reach his eyes. He excused himself from Arthur and started walking toward me, likely intending to intercept me before I caused a scene. "Daisy," he called out, his voice booming with false conviviality. "There she is, my beautiful wife. I told you she was coming to surprise me." He reached for me, his hands outstretched like claws. I sidestepped him. I walked up the 3 steps onto the stage. The lead singer looked confused, but I smiled at him, a terrifying, tight smile, and took the microphone from the stand. The feedback whined for a second, a sharp screech that silenced the room. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, amplified through the massive speakers. "I am Daisy Miller, Mark's wife, and Chloe's cousin." The room went dead silent. Mark froze at the bottom of the stairs, his face draining of color. Mark was just telling me how excited he was to be here. I continued, my eyes locking onto his. He told me this wedding was an investment, an opportunity to build a legacy. Mark started to climb the stairs. "Daisy, get down from there. You are drunk." "I am stone cold sober." "Mark," I said into the mic, "unlike you were when you gambled away our daughter's heart surgery money 3 hours ago." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Arthur Henderson frowned. Stepping forward, "What is this?" Arthur asked, his voice deep and authoritative. "It is a funny story, Arthur," I said, turning to the groom. "You see, Mark stole $5,000 from a savings account meant to fix the hole in his 6-year-old daughter's chest. He used it to buy that suit he is wearing, and to fly here." "Daisy, stop." Mark lunged for me. I stepped back. The band members intervened, blocking Mark's path. They sensed the volatility, but that was not enough. I said, my voice rising, "He lost that money. So he forged my signature on a home equity loan and stole another $100,000. He lost that too. And when he ran out of chips, he decided to diversify his portfolio." I pulled the flash drive from my clutch. I held it up. It glinted under the chandelier lights. He decided to blackmail the bride. Chloe let out a sob from the head table. She buried her face in her hands. Arthur looked at Chloe, then at Mark. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple. "Blackmail?" Arthur roared. "He has photos." "Arthur," I said, looking at Mark, who was now being restrained by a saxophone player. "Photos from college. He threatened to release them if Chloe did not give him more money for the roulette table. Is that not right?" "Mark, she is lying," Mark screamed, struggling against the musician. "She is crazy. She has been off her meds." "Arthur, listen to me. I am about to close a deal. The only deal you are closing is a plea bargain." A voice boomed from the back of the room. The heavy double doors swung open. 4 uniformed Las Vegas police officers marched in. Behind them walked Mr. Thompson, leaning on his cane, looking grim. "Mark Miller?" the lead officer shouted. Mark stopped struggling. He looked at the police, then at me. The arrogance evaporated. The narcissism crumbled. In its place was the terrified, pathetic face of a small man who had finally run out of road. "You, Saoting Haling, Iki," Mark hissed it at me, his eyes filled with pure venom. "You bitch. You ruined everything. No. Mark, I said into the microphone, my voice echoing with finality. I just turned on the lights. The police swarmed the stage. They grabbed Mark, pulling his arms behind his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Arthur Henderson turned to Chloe. He did not yell. He just looked at her with disgust. You paid him? Arthur asked quietly. You gave him money? Xiao Yuzing howling. 2 hash is greater than I was scared. Arthur. Chloe wept. I did not want you to see. Xiao Yuzing howling. Jing hao dayu. Arthur took off his ring and dropped it onto the table. It bounced once and rolled into a butter dish. The wedding is over, Arthur announced to the room. Everyone, get out. Pandemonium erupted. Guests began to whisper, shout, and scramble for the exits. I stood on the stage, watching the police drag Mark away. He was shouting obscenities, blaming me, blaming the casino, blaming the world. I lowered the microphone. My hand was shaking now, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. I looked at Chloe. She was alone at the table, sobbing into her napkin. Her fairy tale was over. I walked down the stairs. I did not look at anyone. I walked straight toward Mr. Thompson. It is done, I whispered. Not quite, Mr. Thompson said gently, guiding me toward the side exit away from the cameras that were starting to flash. Vinny and his friends are waiting in the lobby. The police are handling them too. But Daisy, Xiao Yuzing howling, 2 hash is greater than the house. We cannot stop the foreclosure process now that the fraud is public. The bank will seize it as evidence. Let them have it, I said, walking out into the cool desert night. It was never really a home anyway. I looked up at the sky. The stars were invisible behind the glare of the city lights. But somewhere out there, back in Chicago, my daughter was sleeping. I had lost my house. I had lost my marriage. I had humiliated my family. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. The revolving doors of the Bellagio spun slowly behind me, exhaling a gust of conditioned air that smelled of lilies and disaster. Outside, the Las Vegas Strip was still alive, a neon artery pulsing with the manic energy of a million desperate dreams. But I stood in the shadow of the portico, watching the end of my own nightmare play out in blue and red strobe lights. 2 police cruisers were parked at the curb, their lights cutting through the darkness. I watched as the officers guided Mark into the back of the first car. He was not fighting anymore. The fight had drained out of him the moment the handcuffs clicked, replaced by a slumped, pathetic defeat. But as the officer placed a hand on his head to guide him into the vehicle, Mark looked up. He found me standing there in my black dress. Even from 20 feet away, I saw his lips move. He did not mouth, I am sorry. He did not mouth, I love you. You did this. He mouthed, you killed us. The door slammed shut, severing the connection. I watched his face disappear behind the tinted glass. I expected to feel a surge of triumph. I expected the cinematic rush of victory, the soundtrack swelling as the villain was vanquished. But there was no music. There was only the ringing in my ears and a hollow, aching chasm in my chest. Inner monologue. Why do I not feel happy? He is gone. The monster is in a cage. But as I look at that car driving away, I do not see a monster. I see the man I married 10 years ago. I see the father of my child, and I see my own reflection in the window. I let it get this far. I watered the seeds of his narcissism with my silence. I fed his entitlement with my fear. I am not just a victim. I was the soil in which his madness grew. Mr. Thompson stepped up beside me. He looked tired, leaning heavily on his cane. They picked up Vinny in the valet area. Mr. Thompson said quietly. He was armed. You are lucky, Daisy. If you had not come here tonight, if you had waited at home, Saoyutsing Haling, 2 hashes greater than this could have ended very differently. I nodded, but I could not speak. The realization of how close I had come to physical violence made my knees tremble. Go home, Daisy, Mr. Thompson said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Go to your daughter. I will handle the arraignment. I will handle the bank. I walked away from the hotel. I walked until the noise of the sirens faded, replaced by the rush of traffic on Las Vegas Boulevard. I found a concrete bench near the sidewalk and sat down. My feet were blistered from the heels. My expensive dress felt like a costume I no longer knew how to wear. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact. This was the part I had been dreading more than the confrontation. Facing Mark was a battle of anger. Facing my mother was a battle of shame. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. Daisy? Her voice was thick with sleep and worry. Is everything okay? How is the crisis at the hospital? I closed my eyes. I could not lie anymore. The lies had burned down with the rest of my life. Mom, I whispered. My voice broke. I am not at the hospital. I am in Las Vegas. Las Vegas? What on earth? Saoyutsing Haling, to Daisy. You are scaring me. I took a deep breath. The desert air was dry, scorching my throat. Mark is in jail. Mum, he stole the money. Lily's surgery money. He stole it all. And Saoyutsing Haling, 2 hash is greater than. I paused, the words sticking in my throat like jagged glass. He forged my signature. He took out a loan against the house. There was silence on the other end. A long, terrified silence. The house is gone. Mom, the bank is going to take it. We have nowhere to go. I heard my mother gasp. A sharp intake of breath that sounded like a physical blow. I braced myself for the judgment. I braced myself for the "I told you so," for the lecture about how I should have left him years ago, about how I had failed to protect my family. Daisy, my mother said softly. Her voice was trembling, but it was not angry. Are you safe? Yes, I sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. I am safe. And is Lily safe? Yes, she is with you. Then the house does not matter. My mother said fiercely, it is just wood and brick. Daisy, let it burn. You come home. We will figure it out. We have the guest room. We have the pension. You come home. I sat on that bench in the middle of Sin City, surrounded by strangers and flashing lights, and I wept. I wept for the 3-bedroom colonial with the water stain in the foyer. I wept for the garden I would never see bloom again. I wept for the 10 years of my life I had wasted trying to fix a man who only wanted to break me. But as the tears fell, the heaviness began to lift. The house was gone. The money was gone. The reputation was gone. But I was still here. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I looked at the street. A taxi was pulling up to the curb. I stood up. I took off the heels and carried them in my hand, feeling the warm concrete beneath my bare feet. It felt rough. It felt real. I hailed the taxi. Airport, please. I said to the driver, I was going back to Chicago. I was going back to a foreclosure notice and a mountain of debt, but I was also going back to my daughter. And for the first time in a long time, I was going back as a free woman. The radiator in our new apartment hissed and clanked. A rhythmic, metallic cough that echoed through the two tiny rooms. It was annoying, loud, and erratic. But to me, it sounded like music. It sounded like heat I could actually afford. It had been 6 months since the night the lights went out in Las Vegas. I sat at the wobbly laminate table in the kitchen, wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee that I had brewed at home. No more Starbucks, no more pretending. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely described as up and coming. The paint was peeling in the corner, and the view from the window was a brick wall and a dumpster. But it was ours. I looked into the living room. Lily was building a castle out of cardboard boxes. She was wearing a pink t-shirt, and for the first time in her life, her skin was pink too. The blue tint around her lips was gone. The surgery had happened 4 months ago. We did not pay for it with a big gambling win. We did not pay for it with a GoFundMe miracle. I paid for it with humility. I spent weeks sitting in the basement of the hospital, filling out financial aid forms, pleading my case to the Charity Care Board, and navigating the labyrinth of state Medicaid expansion. It was grueling. It was embarrassing, but it was real. The scar running down the center of her chest was fading, a thin silver line that marked the boundary between who we were and who we are. I looked down at the envelope on the table. It was stamped with the seal of the Illinois Department of Corrections. Xiao Jinghao Ling to Mark. He was currently serving a 5-year sentence at Stateville Correctional Center for wire fraud, identity theft, and extortion. The plea deal had been swift, without the money for a high-powered defense, and with his fraternity brother Barry turning state's witness to save his own skin. Mark had crumbled. I had visited him once. 2 months ago, I sat behind the glass partition and looked at the man who had worn a $3,000 suit to steal our future. He was wearing a jumpsuit that fit poorly. He looked smaller, but his eyes were the same. Inner monologue. I went there expecting an apology. I went there hoping to see remorse, but all he did was complain about the food. He complained that his public defender was incompetent. He complained that I had not put money on his commissary account. He never asked about Lily. He never asked if the surgery was successful. He only cared that his audience was gone. I picked up the letter. I did not open it. I knew what it said. It would be another list of demands. Another rewriting of history where he was the victim of a vindictive wife and a cruel system. I walked over to the trash can and dropped the envelope inside. It landed softly on top of the coffee grounds. I was not innocent in this story. I knew that now. My flaw was not that I had an emotional affair years ago. My flaw was that I had been an enabler. I had mistaken cowardice for patience. I had mistaken silence for loyalty. I had let a parasite feed on us because I was too afraid of the pain of ripping it out. The house was gone. The bank had sold it at auction last month for a fraction of its value. I still owed thousands of dollars to the payday loan sharks. A debt I was paying off $50 at a time by picking up extra shifts on weekends. My credit score was ruined. I was a 38-year-old single mother starting over with less than nothing. But as I watched Lily knock down her cardboard castle and laugh, a full, deep belly laugh that her old heart never would have supported, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. I walked over to the window and pushed it open. The cold Chicago air rushed in, biting and clean. I had lost the American dream of the suburbs. I had lost the husband. I had lost the image of the perfect family. But I had saved the girl, and in the process, I had saved the woman. Lily looked up at me, her eyes bright. "Mommy, look, I made a fortress. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. It is beautiful, baby, I said. It is the strongest fortress in the world. I took a sip of my cheap coffee. It tasted like victory. Freedom was expensive, painfully so. But as I looked at my daughter and my peeling walls, I knew I would gladly pay the price every single day for the rest of my life.